back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup alongside Joel Cunningham. I'm John Siegel. Well, Joel, today we're out here. It's a beautiful day here in Kentucky. We're here at the historic Spendthrift Farm Stallion Complex. You know, this place is home to horses like Malibu Moon, Into Mischief. They have a lot of good horses here, and also some historic ones that have been here throughout the years.
A lot of horses, legendary horses buried just in the vicinity of where we're standing, John. I mean, there's a Najwa statue, Reza native statue, so this is really hallowed grounds for the thoroughbred community. And is there a better place to be on a beautiful Kentucky fall morning than here at Spendthrift Farm? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Man, it's beautiful. You know, we're just a few days away from the Breeders' Cup at this point. We don't have any races to really recap and nothing to preview. I thought Todd did a great job while ever I was gone. Checked in on you guys while I was in Australia. It was great to be there for the Everest. Amazing $10 million race. It was the most, it was the richest turf race in the world, and it was exciting to be there. It was really a thrill to be at that racetrack.
Yeah, and Todd came with the zingers, man. He brought the fastballs, and we had a good time the last 2 weeks. So yeah, big thank you to Todd Schrupp and TVG for stepping in.
For sure. Well, we mentioned the turf racing. We're gonna talk about some top fives in the turf next week, but this week let's talk about all the dirt top fives. And I'd like to start with the Juvenile, and why not? We got the #1 horse is Bolt d'Oro. That's no secret. It's not just because Spendthrift is our sponsor. You've been on this horse way before they bought in. Tell me, what do you think about the Juvenile, and run down that top five for me?
Well, I think he could be one of the most exciting horses we've seen in terms of a combination of talent and pedigree, John, and what he's going to accomplish. I mean, we've already seen multiple Grade 1 winner at 2. He's actually bred to be a classic horse at 3. So, I mean, he's going to stand right over here in the stallion barn one day, and he's going to be a big-time stallion for Spendthrift. Look, this horse will be the shortest price favorite, in my opinion, on Breeders' Cup Day. He's going to be odds-on. Price is going to hover around 3 to 5, 4 to 5, depending on the field size here. And you're going to see a lot of major talented horses dodge him because he is that distinctive of a favorite, particularly at Del Mar, where he's already a Grade 1 winner.
Well, you're talking about horses that may dodge him. There's a really talented horse that's already kind of saying they're not sure if they're going to come or not, and that's the horse that you have in at #2. Tell me, do you think they'll actually run that horse against Bolt d'Oro in the Juvenile?
Let's look at the top 5, John. I mean, you want to talk about a big year to come for 2 stallions, Medaglia d'Oro and Curlin. I mean, just look at my top 4 there. Bolt d'Oro and Montauk, both by Medaglia d'Oro. Both give me every indication they're going to be major classic horses. And look, this top 5, I understand, Montauk just broke his maiden a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I think the connections maybe believe he's a Breeders' Cup juvenile horse, but they realize that after just breaking your maiden a couple weeks ago, having to travel to the West Coast to face Bolt d'Oro on his home track is not the best scenario right now. A horse that has a few races under his belt and a couple Grade 1 wins.
Yeah.
That's probably not the best scenario for Montauk. So expect to see him in the Remsen, in the Najwa, New York Path, and then I think you'll see him down at Gulfstream in the big races there. But a monster future. I mean, the way he broke his maiden, John, gets you super excited. So when we look at this juvenile top 5, we're Triple Crown Insider in the spring, right?
Yeah.
You're getting an early preview of what this list is going to look like, in my opinion, as we go into 2018. And then I mentioned Curlin, Solomini, the Baffert Curlin for Zayat Stables, and Good Magic, who's still a maiden. I don't think they're going to run against Bolt d'Oro. But until we see pre-entries and intentions, I'm going to have him in the top 4 because I think he belongs there. He projects around 2 turns.
And then your horse in at #5, Free Drop Billy. Obviously, everyone knows he ran huge last time out. You got him in the 5 spot.
Yeah, and he belongs in there. I mean, seasoned horse. He's been on the road. He improved around 2 turns, winning the Breeders' Futurity rather easily, you know, like his pedigree suggested. But it's interesting. Romans and Albaugh have a couple horses. Hollywood Star's another one. I don't think is much less talented than Free Drop Billy, but I think they're all running for minor awards behind Bolt d'Oro.
All right, well, let's just go ahead and stick with the 2-year-olds, and let's talk about the fillies real quick. And I see here you got 2 Malibu Moons in at #1 and #2. Tell me, what do you think about the juvenile fillies this year?
I think Malibu Moon owns the division. He's standing right over there 100 yards from us in his paddock, and boy, does he still look like a young, athletic stallion for his age. I mean, what an incredible specimen. And look, he's got the division leaders in here. And Heavenly Love, I like the way she improved around 2 turns. I like the way she won the Alcibiades, and for me, she belongs to #1 on this list. And the local horse, Moonshine Memories, I think belongs to #2. This list didn't change for me from last week when we launched it with Todd.
Well, let's go ahead then and let's move on to the sprint division, because I noticed a horse that had a lot of hype around him early on in the year, and that was Mind Your Biscuits. He's a horse that's kind of moved down several people's lists. And then I see a new horse in there. Well, he's not new to the list, but I see Roy H. has got that Grade 1 win now. Tell me, what do you think about the Sprint this year? It seems like a division that's kind of lost a few superstars, but do you think that we're going to see, you know, these horses come back and maybe Dre Fawn comes back to form?
I think the Sprint's going to be a heck of a betting race. I mean, Todd Schrupp and I talked about this race. This is where we had some disagreement last week. He didn't like my top 5. I personally think 1, 2, and 3, you're splitting hairs between them. I understand the home field advantage for number 2 and number 3 in California. Takavul, loved his work last week. He looks like a horse on the improve, enough for me to put him in that 4 spot. And then Mind Your Biscuits, he's the closer in the race. If they get a little, you know, a little fast up front, he's the one that could benefit in here. But I even like American Pastime. I think that's 6 good horses, John. The Sprint, I really think these horses run hard all year. And for me, when I'm looking at a sprinter, and you could say this about every division, but particularly sprinters, I like a horse that's in razor sharp form and on the improve. And I think Imperial Hint is that. I don't think he's over the top yet. I think he's actually sitting on a race that could pair his last effort. And I know the class is a big thing with him. He's only a Grade 2 Smile Sprint winner. Didn't really beat a ton in there. But for me, his form is so good that, again, if you're shaving hairs, you know, I'm going to put him in that number 1 spot over Dre Fong and Roy H. because I don't think there's a big difference there.
All right, well, let's stick with the sprinters and let's talk about the fillies. You know, I see some horses in here that have been, you know, running for a while now, but I noticed that in these top 5s, you have several horses that you considered to put into that top 5. So it seems like maybe this race is a little wide open this year.
It's extremely wide open. I think most years it's wide open. I mean, you see a lot of upset winners in this race many years. I mean, Sky Diamonds, I mean, Todd mentioned last week, he's right, former claimer. But she has Del Mar form, 7 furlongs I think she'll like. And so she's a local filly that's on top of her game. I liked her work the other day. I think she belongs in number 1. Unique Bella, I mean, big, framey, 2-turn mare. I think 7 furlongs is a little sharp for her. You know, in a race like this, where you're facing top class competition, I really question her in terms of her draw. I think she's gonna have to have everything go right for her to be able to show that talent, get up going 1 turn, 7 furlongs. And since I know she's gonna be your favorite, I'm gonna get away from her in here. Constellation, a consistent, hard-knocking filly. Home track, loves 7 furlongs. I think she's coming in this race the right way. My concern about her is she doesn't win a lot. I mean, we talked about that last week with Todd. But again, you know, I think to your point here, I mean, Finest City even, coming in fresh, your defending champion. We've seen a lot of long shots or prices win this type of race because I think the best filly mares, they point for the Breeders' Cup. And I think the sprint division, particularly in a middle distance like 7 furlongs, you can see a lot happen at the end of the year with this group. And that's why I think really you start looking at Karina Me, even Paula Silver Lining, By the Moon. I mean, there's 7, 8 mares in here that I think have a legitimate shot at winning this race. So I'm not real confident in any of my top 5.
All right, well, let's move on to a race that looks like it's another wide open race and is every single year, and that's the Dirt Mile. This is the one where maybe I argue with your top 5 just a little bit more than any other ones because I noticed that you don't have Practical Joke in there.
I love the horse too.
Yeah, and he's just such a tough horse. I'm just surprised he's not in the top 5. Tell me why not.
If this is the 1-turn mile in New York, I think he might be the bet of the day. I mean, I'm such a big fan of this horse's ability, John. I think he's as talented, and we talked about, as any 3-year-old in this crop. My question is, he's never won around 2 turns. I mean, that kick gets flat around that 2nd turn. And while I think he's going to take a ton of money in here, him traveling from New York to Del Mar to try to get his first win around 2 turns against a group like this isn't a proposition that I like a lot. So Collected, I admit, we're going to see pre-entries next week. We'll have a show and we'll be able to discuss pre-entries amongst other things. We'll see if Collected decides to go in the Dirt Mile or Classic. I think they're leaning Classic's probably the best move for him in his future stallion career. But if Collected were to run in here, I think no question he's the horse to beat. Same with Pavel, horse that was on the board in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, up and coming 3-year-old, super talented, loved his Smarty Jones win. If he ran in this Dirt Mile, I think he'd be the horse to beat if Collected's not in it. They may want to go in the Classic. We'll see what happens when the pre-entries come out. And if that's the case, then maybe Baffert's More Spirit off of Freshening would be the horse to beat in here around 2 turns on his home track. But it's wide open. Accelerate, you know, again, a 2nd-tier type colt. This is what you get in the Dirt Mile. You get a lot of 2nd-tier type horses. Now, we know that Practical Joke's not 2nd-tier. His problem is, again, around the 2 turns. Can he finish to beat a Grade 1 field shipping in from New York?
Oh, it'll be interesting to see the pre-entries and who actually runs in there. Let's move now and let's talk about the Distaff. You know, I'm surprised a little bit in the Distaff when I look in here. You got Forever Unbridled in at #1 and Stellar Wind in at #2. I'm just slightly surprised by that because Stellar Wind, it's her home track. She's from California. Forever Unbridled shipping over again. Tell me, how come you have them in that order?
This top 5 just doesn't change for me other than Paradise Woods getting on the list because she could be lone speed. We saw somewhat of a return to form. I still question her at Del Mar, particularly against this class of horses. But Forever Unbridled, I just think, John, you know, last year ran so well, you know, coming in off the plane in the Breeders' Cup. I mean, she ran against 2 legendary mares and was right behind them. Really impressed with that performance. Like the way that they've campaigned her. You know, it's sort of been a light, deliberate campaign. Dallas Stewart has had, he's been right with her the whole way through. I mean, she's fired every time. Stellar Wind, I mean, you remember I picked her last year over Beholder, and she, to me, it's just hard to count on her. You know, the way they campaign her, I know they battled through some issues with her, and she's just not reliable enough for me to put her over Forever Unbridled, who brings her A game every time. So that's why I have the order I do. And I think the 3-year-olds are dangerous. Abel Tasman, Elate, I mean, Elate beat nobody in the Beldame last time out, but I love the way she did it. I mean, just individual performance, a filly that's finally coming into her own. I mean, I think that's a very strong top 4 in my opinion, and honestly wouldn't surprise me if any of them won it.
All right, well, let's jump now to the Classic then. Obviously, it's the marquee race of the Breeders' Cup. No surprise here, you still have Arrogate in at #1. Tell me, you were a little bit concerned when you were kind of seeing his works on XBTV and kind of how the horse was doing. To me, when I see his works now, he seems like he at least looks better in his works. You think the horse is getting back to form?
Well, John, I think you just brought up, to me, the significant news of the week in that, you know, Arrogate, a horse that Todd questioned me on last week, and look, that's very fair game. I do believe this division can be wide open, but I think I saw Arrogate maybe turn the corner last week in his work. I mean, he worked 3 quarters against a Rabbit who's not a significant horse. They went relatively slow, but I saw things in that work that I have not seen since before he went to the Dubai World Cup in any of his works. I saw him switch leads on cue, show genuine interest to the wire, and then gallop out in earnest like a horse that had a lot more to give in there. So I think he took a positive step, in my opinion. That lets me know that Bob probably has him on the right trajectory and the right track. He's got a couple more works now before the Breeders' Cup Classic. And look, if you think he's a better horse now than he was in the Pacific Classic, which that's my theory, he almost won that race. And that's a grade 1. He got a big buyer number for it. So again, at 1.25 miles, I still think he's the best horse in the world on dirt. And Gunrunner's working well over there. It's worth noting. I think they made a good move getting him over there and acclimated to that track and that weather. The problem with him is, again, I question him going 1.25 miles. Those are your 2 favorites. West Coast, another 3-year-old. He's not a great workhorse. Yeah. His work the other day, you know, was just okay, but I think that's him. You know, I think he's still a legit top 3 contender. And really, my top 5 doesn't change. I'll just say this, a horse we haven't talked about is Gunnevera. Watch out for Gunnevera, John. I just think if he gets the right pace, and again, diversify, we talked about the X factor. Some of the speed, if it shows up in the Breeders' Cup Classic, a full field, and there's a contentious pace with maybe collected, diversified, gun runner, and other injected speed in the race, I believe Gunnevera is a legit 10 furlong horse that if he gets the pace set up and he's on top of his game, I think the talent is there for him to maybe pull an upset at a monster price.
Yeah, but he can't have him as far back as they had him in his last race and think you're going to run down those 2 horses. I mean, they have to keep him a little closer. I'm not saying, I know he's a closer, but I mean, these 2 horses, when you talk about Gunrunner and you talk about Arrogate, you're not going to overcome them, I think, you know, if you're that far back in this race.
Yeah, if Arrogate brings his A game, he's going to win the race. You're counting on him not, being the Arrogate we've seen the last couple months and not, prior in the springtime. Gunnevera, I just think, John, we've always loved the talent. Yeah. And he wasn't the same horse in the Triple Crown. He was a little underweight, and it showed. I liked his Travers so much. I don't know what they're going to do with the jockey there. I mean, if you go back and watch the Travers, he's swinging in from the 2 path to the 4 and 5 path. He's all over the place. Takes the turn extremely wide. Yep. West Coast had the advantage that day. He saved all the ground, got away on the front end. So I credit Gunnevera for that performance, even though he didn't win. I just think that, if there was ever a field or a time that you could get, and we've seen these upsets before, how do you explain a 20 or 30 to 1 upset in the Breeders' Cup Classic? He's a horse that I think could do that, but he needs the right setup. All right, well, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. We want to thank Spendthrift Farm for having us out here today and for being our sponsor. Make sure you guys come back next week. We'll run through all the turf top 5s.